Hello, welcome everybody. Good evening. My name is Luke. For you, those of you who don't know me, this is Renata.
Hi.
And welcome to our first online session for 2019. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're broadcasting from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I'd also like to, before we get started, thank Slater and Gordon, who provide a lot of support for what we do here, and a lot of resources, and we couldn't do it without them. Before we get started, a lot of you will have hopefully will have tuned in last year and sort of familiar with what we do here. But for those of you who haven't, this is going to be our first live session of the year. We do these. We're going to try to do these on the first Wednesday of every month, and that's a timeline that we're confident that we're going to be able to sort of stick to. Fingers crossed. But that's something that we're going to do, and we want to keep bringing you topics that you want to hear about as well. We got a pretty good response last year from Silica and from Diesel and from Workplace Amenities. So we're going to try to keep bringing you content that you find interesting and helpful in your workplace.
And I guess if there's something burning that you want to know about, well, use the Facebook group to put in suggestions and whatever. Now, I'm here.
Sam's Safety Update.
And we'll be having some fantastic guests to assist us with the live shows.
Yes.
People who are really expert in their areas.
Yes, we've got some great content lined up for the coming year, and we're really excited. So with that in mind, today is going to be consultation, and the reason for that is we had a lot of people text through, so I hope a lot of you were in attendance at the HSR conference that we had in October last year. I think we definitely had like record-breaking attendance, so I'm sure a lot of you were there. And then throughout the day, we had sort of the live text line of people that could send questions through, and that we had pages and pages of text messages, questions that came through, it's important to us to sort of be as helpful as possible. So when those questions come through, we get a sense of what people are interested in, and of just a common thread throughout a lot of those questions. A common thread through a lot of those questions was consultation. What are my employer's responsibilities? How can I make sure my employer is actually consulting? What do I do if the employer isn't consulting? And just sort of general advice in working through that, because it can be quite difficult to know what's expected and how to get the best result out of that process. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be getting through some of the actual questions that came through. So if you did send a question through about consultation during that conference, we'll probably get to it. But also, as always, in the comments on the video here tonight, send your questions through now, and we'll get to them as well. We'll have those come up when we see them. So, without further ado, before we do get started though, we do have, it's going to be a regular segment because people are keen for it. Sam's safety update, which is just going to be, what's happening in OHS, currently, what's been happening, particularly over the break. It's been off for a couple of months and haven't really been, except for, Renata sends out the journal every week, but we want to have a bit of a video update as well. So Sam's going to come in. And welcome Sam.
Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates.
Safety update. G'day gang, thanks for joining us. It's Sam's Safety Update. What an exciting time to be alive. I've just got the top few stories from Renata's Safety Net Journal, or the ones that I thought were some big important ones from the past month and a bit, so far in 2019. So this is some of the top safety news. So far this year, there have been 7 deaths at Victorian workplaces, including a young man who was killed during a routine military training session at Puckapunyal in Victoria, as well as a man who was killed by a bee sting. And this time last year, there had only been 3 workplace deaths. Of course, Trades Hall is keeping the friends, family, and loved ones of these 7 Victorians in our thoughts as we keep pushing to get industrial manslaughter laws introduced. Next story. For the first time in history, someone has been given a jail sentence for a breach of the OHS Act, which is a massive piece of news. So the 72-year-old Maria Jackson was jailed after an employee died when the forklift she was operating dropped a scrapped metal bin on him. Ms. Jackson pleaded guilty to the 2 contraventions of sections 24 and 32 of the OHS Act for failing to ensure other people in the workplace were not exposed to risks to their health, and for recklessly engaging in conduct that places others in the workplace in danger of serious injury. The 72-year-old woman was appealing the court's decision, but the appeal has since been dropped. She will serve 6 months in jail.
Can I add? It's
Yeah, of
just
course.
interesting that it wasn't a prosecution under Section 21, because at the moment there is no jail sentence under that section.
Mm-hmm.
It is Section 32, the reckless endangerment.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
And it's a bit ironic that it's a woman, because I reckon there are many more male employers who probably have been reckless as
Have
well.
breached it in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. Luke, just want to check the audio's coming through on the headphones, my friend. Next story. So Victoria's January temperatures were soaring for much of... Thanks, mate. For much of the month, prompting many news articles and questions about safe working temperatures. As a reminder, in Victoria, there are no specific statutory or regulatory limits on the temperature at which workers can be exposed. However, your employer is expected to prevent your workplace from being uncomfortably hot. Your employer does have a duty of care under the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Act to provide a healthy and safe workplace. Of course, as we all know, and this is a tidbit that I picked up from your Heat page as well on the site, Renata, that according to the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, 35 to 40 degrees is considered to be the limit of high temperature tolerance for most people. So keep that in mind kind of as summer wraps up. Yeah.
And if you're doing physical work, of course, it's going to be a bigger issue. The other thing just to keep in mind, I had a weird question come in where someone was using the wet bulb thermometer. It's very complex, and with the wet bulb thermometer, it's only at 34 degrees that they recommend no physical activity whatsoever.
Okay.
So, yeah, be careful.
Good to know. Next story, and this is a big one, this is a long one as well, but there has been a second historic Patrick's Section 76 prosecution. In a hugely important December prosecution from last year, Patrick's was convicted and fined a total of $475,000 for breaching Section 76 in a series of incidents dating back to 2009. In 2009, Patrick's operated the Western Port in Hastings at the end of February 2009. A client delivered to the warehouse 800 steel coils of different varying weights, and a few days after being told that another forklift could not be found to bring them onto the ship, because they had a forklift, I believe, that couldn't sustain the weight. They were too big.
Yep.
So the manager proposed an alternate method for loading the heavier steel coils, and both the team leader and the elected HSR considered the method that the manager was suggesting that it was unsafe, and that the forklift's kind of limits would be exceeded, and that was an unsafe thing to do, so they didn't do it. And when the manager returned to Melbourne that night, he telephoned the night shift team leader and was told that the stevedores believed that the method was unsafe over the phone. The manager became irate and started yelling abusive messages and words passing around threats to people's job security, thinly veiled threats is kind of what I was gathering. So eventually the HSR called WorkSafe regarding the forklift issue as well as the threats. And soon after that, the manager approached 2 of the 4 employees who were at the morning meeting and withdrew the suggestion that their jobs were on the line and kind of backpedaled after WorkSafe were reached out to, which is interesting. And a few days after that, still, two WorkSafe inspectors attended the Western Port site. A trial was conducted with the forklift in question to test the manager's proposed method and determined it was unsuitable. The manager was able, shortly after, to locate a suitable forklift, which is interesting as well, that it didn't take too much effort on the manager's half after WorkSafe got involved. So Patrick Stevedores was found guilty on 6 counts, convicted and sentenced to pay a total of $475,000.
Yeah, the funny thing is that the only one other major prosecution under 76 was also Patrick's a few years ago, and WorkSafe issued a media release just this week about this one, and their comment was that it dates back so far.
It does, yeah.
Because it was vigorously contested. So Patrick's fought it and fought it and fought it.
And they lost.
And they lost.
Yeah. So a very interesting case. And lastly, our silica campaign is continuing to push for a safer silica standard to be introduced. The campaign was started by Victorian Greg Ballantyne, who has been diagnosed with, I always get this word wrong, sorry Greg, scleroderma due to scleroderma, thanks Luke, due to his exposure to silica dust. As engineered stone becomes more commonly used, especially in kitchen benchtop manufacturing, the risk of workers being exposed to dangerous silica dust is increasing. Not that it's just through benchtop manufacturing, but that's kind of a new thing that's emerging. Greg's petition is calling on WorkSafe Australia to update their silica exposure standard to get in line with the state of knowledge around the dangers of the silica dust and save lives. I'm going to jump out the back in a second and post an online link to Greg's petition. So if you're watching, you can go and sign that petition. It'll take 5 seconds. But that's it for news right now. And remember, you can always get regular news updates on everything OHS via Renata's Safety Net Journal, which comes out weekly. The latest one just went up today as well.
Yep.
So you can see that in our Facebook page as well. So back to Luke in the studio, which is actually just this chair.
Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates. Sam's Safety Updates.
Cool. All right. Thanks a lot, Sam. We always look forward to your updates, and hopefully, we like to hear some good news every now and then, but sadly, it does not always work out that way. So, consultation, Renata.
Yes.
What's the go with consultation?
Well, the go with consultation is, most of you will know that I have an Ask Renata service on the website. Get heaps of queries about consultation. It is a duty. It's a duty under Section 35 of the Act. And in fact, we had a little change, which has made it even clearer that health and safety reps, the employer has to consult with health and safety reps. Now, a little bit of history. Under the 85 Act, when this was first implemented, the employer had to consult with the health and safety rep. No doubt about that.
Yep.
Maxwell said, well, there are lots of workplaces without health and safety reps, so what do we do? So he suggested that where there weren't health and safety reps, the employer had to consult with the affected workers. When it was written up by the drafters, they put that first, and then they put that if health and safety reps were in the workplace, they should be involved. They had to be involved, with or without the employees. So that created quite a lot of problems, because what we ended up getting was Section 35 that set out what the employer had to consult about with affected workers or workers who might be affected, and then Section 36, which was almost like an afterthought, saying, oh, and if there are health and safety reps there, they need to be consulted. They have to be involved in the process.
Okay, yeah.
So that's caused a problem. And just recently, as a bit of a quick fix, but not really a fix, they've put Section 36 into Section 35. Because what we were finding, and this is another reason why a lot of reps were having problems, was that Section 35 had a penalty. Section 36 did not have a penalty. So when reps were issuing PINs to their employers for failing to consult, and of course the employers were disputing the PINs, we were getting from some inspectors that they couldn't do anything about it because there was no penalty, which we didn't think was right, but that has sort of been fixed. So it's a big issue, because despite the fact that in effect employers have had to consult since 1985, how many years later? Do the sums.
Maths is hard. 35, 32.
We are still having problems because employers do not consult. They just don't think they have to.
Sure.
Or they really can't pretend that they don't know, but they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Why should they consult?
Yeah.
And I guess we get into the nitty-gritty now. So it is section 35, as we said. We've got our slides up. I like that really colourful.
Yes, so we've got a bit of a sort of like a 90s word art throwback, which I hope you all enjoy throughout the evening. It's definitely not going to get annoying. So consultation. So what is the employer's duty? What is the actual what does the actual legislation say?
The Act sets out a number of instances which sort of cover a lot of things that an employer has to, so far as reasonably practicable, consult about. Now, that is a bit of an issue because from our point of view, we'd say, well, why would it not be reasonably practicable for an employer to consult? Yeah. But, there might be a couple of genuine cases where, for instance, an employer is... the Melbourne office of an international company, and things are developed internationally and then they're brought in. So that might be an example where the employer might say, well, I didn't even get, or the manager on site might say, well, I didn't even get to know about this, so it wasn't practicable. But generally, we would say that it's always practicable for the employer to consult. And when they have to consult, it's when they're identifying or assessing hazards or risks.
Yeah, so we've got if you have a look up here on the slides, we've got our list of what the Act actually says. So have a read of that for those of you playing at home, and if you want to just talk about it, talk us through.
And that's really important because obviously if you're going to have a healthy and safe workplace, the first step has to be identifying what hazards and risks are there. Now, an employer can do that. It's their legal duty to do that, but doing it in consultation with workers and reps ensures, if it's done properly, that in fact the people who really know about what's affecting them at work get an opportunity to participate in the process. So then clearly deciding what measures to take to control these risks. There's been quite a lot of studies done and research from the national body about, what happens when there's hazardous substances in the workplace, for example. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, in almost, it's really high, like 90% of cases, when controls are implemented, employers introduce PPE.
Yeah.
Now we know, and I think you've probably done this. That's right.
No.
That's right. Lowest on the hierarchy of control. So that's why it's really important that the employer consults with the workers and the health and safety rep, or just the health and safety rep who's there representing the workers, when they're deciding on what measures to take to control these risks.
Yeah.
Adequacy of facilities, and you did that session last time. Facilities is a huge one. Toilets, water, dining rooms, showers, all that sort of stuff. First aid.
Yep.
When deciding on procedures regarding issue resolution. Now, in the Act and in the regs, we have the fallback issue resolution procedure. The Act allows for agreed issue resolution procedures to be brought in. How do you agree? There has to be consultation and agreement, right? Consultation itself. So how is the employer going to consult?
Yeah, so this is actually, this is something that we're going to cover. Like, this is the part that was really interesting to me, is that the employer is bound to consult on how consultation is going to happen, right?
That's right.
So it's not just, the employer gets to decide, we're going to have a meeting and that's going to be it, and then you have to raise your concerns at that meeting. That might be how it's eventually agreed upon, but they can't just decide how consultation is going to happen. There needs to be consultation about that.
That's right. Importantly, because we had that problem with the involvement of reps in the consultation, the regulations, which have now been updated, but it's the same in the 2017 regs, have at regulation 21 spells out how exactly health and safety reps are to be involved in the consultation. So it's all about making sure reps have all the information, have that as early as possible, and they're the sorts of things over which there should be consultation about. So that way we have a common understanding of, what is consultation, and we'll get to that in a minute. There was more on that list, I think. Yep. Determines the membership of health and safety committees. There's a separate section on health and safety committees, section 72, that says there has to be at least half the membership have to be employees, and where practicable they should be reps. There's a lot of debate though, because what happens if the employer says, yeah, sure, have the committee that's 10 people, 9 of them can be reps, and I'll put the safety manager on. I would say if I were a rep, no, that's not good enough, because then we just talk to ourselves and nobody takes any notice.
Yeah, that's right.
Also, if there's a situation where it's a large organisation and there are 50 reps or 30 reps, you don't want all 30 on.
No.
But you want to be able to make sure that the reps who are the more senior reps, who are more competent, more confident, would go on the committee.
That's actually one of the more interesting questions that we got texted through to us. So one person said, I'm employed with the local government and management. They've employed an external OHS specialist who now consults with management in implementing safe systems of work. And as a result of this, the HSRs are left out of the loop until the document gets signed off, and then it gets passed on to the HSRs.
Well,
so that's not consultation. That's
not at all consultation.
No, and then so they can't just decide that, who we're going to consult with. We're not just going to be like, we're going to consult with some specialists that we're going to bring in, and effectively because we're paying them, and they're probably just going to say what we want them to.
Look, even if that specialist is actually really genuine and comes up with a great procedure.
Don't mean to malign specialists.
The point is, there hasn't been consultation.
Yes, that's
so
right.
I think that's Luke's point, and that's exactly the situation. This one I've highlighted, I've put in bold. The employer has to consult when he proposes, when I'm using the he, it's obviously the company, proposes changes to the workplace, plants, substances, or the conduct of work. Now you'll see the proposes there. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean to you, Luke, in plain English?
In plain English, it would mean that they have an idea and just they want to float it out there.
Yeah. They're proposing it. They're not implementing it. They're not developing it. They're not saying this is done. So it's that's exactly at the stage where the boss wakes up one morning and says, I've got a great idea. I think we're going to get a new machine that's going to do this fabulous thing. It's going to be really great. It's going to be... That's at the point...
Our boss has visions.
Yes, our boss does have visions, but hopefully they're pretty good. But in this case, I'll give you a really good example of this. I went out to a factory many years ago, and it made Laminex bench tops, right? Mm-hmm. And there was this machine that was imported from Germany, I think it was, that was whiz bang, and we looked at it and we said, "Oh my God, and the guys looked at us and said, yeah, they didn't consult with us. They ordered it before they'd even talked to us." And when that got here, which is when we found out about it, it didn't fit in the room.
Well, they couldn't get it in the door.
They couldn't get it into the space that they wanted it in, so they had to try and find another way. It created all these problems. Now, if they'd asked the reps, if they'd consulted, they said, we want to get this, the reps probably would have said, well, tell us about the machine. What are the specifications? What does it do? Where would it go? How would we work with it?
Yeah.
Didn't do any of that.
Sure, because it's the people who are working with it every day.
That's right.
They're going to know it inside out and what it needs to do.
And I think the other really important one, that's a really obvious one, but a really important one there is the conduct of work. Now, the conduct of work is super important because it's about things like shift work arrangement, things like safe work method statements, things like how are you actually going to do that work. So the boss, again, wakes up with a great idea. He's going to save heaps of money by reorganising how people do things, not thinking that they need to consult about it, not thinking that the reason they need to consult about it is because they need to make sure that the workers have that input, and the rep can say, our people are a bit worried about this because of XYZ.
Yeah, absolutely.
And finally, any other thing prescribed by the regs. Now, the regs doesn't generally prescribe more stuff because they have to stay within the Act, but some sections of the regs are quite specific about where the reps need to be consulted, for example, with the asbestos or the lead or whatever. So it's much more specific.
Okay, great. So we've actually... we have had a question come through from Visalia, but I think it actually ties in very well with what we're actually just about to talk about. So we'll move on to this next slide, which is how to sort of get, creating the right conditions for consultation to occur, I guess.
And I guess the thing is that I get lots of queries, and a lot of those questions were about, what do you do when the boss refuses, or what do you do when you find out? I'm taking a step back and I'm saying the Act is there. That's what the law says. So what can you do to try and head them off at the pass and make sure they take the right path of righteousness rather than the wrong path of breaching the law? And I always say to reps, set up a meeting with your employer as soon as you can after you've had the training. If you haven't done it yet, as in had the meeting, have it now. sit down with them and say, I'd like to talk to you about my role as rep. I've taken on this role. I've just done the training, and clarify how we should be relating to each other, what needs to happen so that I can assist you in making this workplace healthier and safer. And one of the main things is that you consult with me as per the Act, and you can show them Section 35. Your duty to consult with me as the rep and with the other reps, if there are more reps, about all these things. List what the requirements are. In particular, emphasise that this consultation has to happen before changes are implemented. In fact, they have to be at the light bulb stage.
Yeah.
This is when I'm thinking of doing it. This is when I go and consult with the people I need to consult with. See if you can get agreement on how this will happen. Don't forget, as Luke pointed out, there has to be consultation on how the consultation occurs. If you can, get it in writing. So get the employer to agree that this is the process that they're going to implement at this workplace for consultation, and this is what they'll always follow. And remember, your employer has to consult with you regarding consultation. Oh, I've just said that. So point out, if he says, well, why are you even here? So, because that part of the Act also says that I have to consult with you, that you have to consult with me about how we're going to consult.
That's right.
So by doing this, you're sort of setting out the ground rules, hopefully bringing them to the table before you get into a situation where you're disagreeing and you're having to, do something about what they haven't done.
Okay. Sounds like the storm's kicking
Yeah.
outside. Hope you're all hope you're all okay out there. It's going to be a pretty hectic night.
Yeah.
So that sort of ties in very well with this question that Visalia sent in. So just down here, if you can read it. So they're transferring from government to NGO, and the new employer takes over the business on the 1st of April. How does Section 35/Section 36...
No 36 anymore, Visalia.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. There is no Section 36 anymore. It's been merged with Section 35.
Yeah.
So the text is all the same, but it just means that it changes...
It now has a penalty, which means you can't get from inspectors that they'll cancel a PIN because they can't enforce it, which is a load of rubbish anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so how does that apply regarding the new employer? So basically a new employer is taking over, and then so what would be the best way to approach that situation?
Well, I would think that the new employer, the identity of the new employer is already known.
Yep.
And so I would be formally putting to the department that you're requesting, and particularly if there are new providers or these new employers are at different, I don't know how the situation is. I'm assuming there's not one for the whole state. I'm assuming that different providers will be given areas. But what should happen, and I would probably do this through the union if possible, just to do it, to make sure that it's done systematically across the service. But certainly you could do it with your own region. Formally write to the department and formally request that a meeting is set up between the health and safety reps or the health and safety committee and the new employer to bed this stuff down, to say, are you aware this is meant to happen? What are you planning to do about procedures? What changes are you proposing? Or are you going to come in and just take over for the meantime? If that's the situation, if they're coming in and they're just going to use whatever's there and then come, propose changes, then the consultation can happen then. Otherwise, you say, well, we before any changes occur, we want to talk to you. That's what I would propose.
Okay, cool. Well, hopefully that helps, Visalia. If not, keep the conversation going. Send us another message if there's something else you want to know about. But otherwise, we'll get back into it. So actually, we were talking about this earlier today, and when you raised this next part, what actually is consultation, right? So we start off with what the legislation says and like what the responsibility is, but what is it? What does it look like when it's done correctly? And so that's sort of where what we want to cover now. Which part of the Act is this from?
Section 35.
It's from the same section of the Act. So this is, and this actually is it's a detailed sort of description of what consultation looks like. So
under the Act.
So something you can point to and say, you are or you are not, either way, to your employer, are or are not doing this. You are or are not sharing information you might be giving us an opportunity to express our views, but you may not be taking these into account.
Yeah, and I think Luke's right in that he says, well, this is what genuine consultation is meant to be. This is what the Act says. This is how the employer is supposed to consult. There's more detail in the regs, as I said before, about when that information needs to be provided and all that sort of stuff. But, and this is important, consultation does not mean agreement. So where we've got the problems though, and I get lots of queries, and I think some of the questions that came through, which I don't have in front of me,
That's okay.
they're about, what happens when, in our workplace, the employer just comes along with something, presents it at the meeting, says this is what it is, this is what we're going to do, and they claim that that's consultation. So the whole issue is about what is genuine consultation. Now, taking these views into account, what does that actually mean? And I'd like you to go to the next slide.
Okay.
Because it doesn't explain what it means, but there's this great definition that is now quite old, but it came from one of the commissioners at the Industrial Relations Commission when obviously an issue had gone to him and he had to decide what was consultation. And he said, in relation to the concept of consultation, I wish to make it clear that this involves more than a mere exchange of information. For consultation to be effective, the participants must be contributing to the decision-making process, not only in appearance but in fact. So that's saying that if there's genuine consultation and the employer genuinely takes the views of the HSRs and the people they represent into account, that will mean that at least some of the time, maybe not all of the time, but at least some of the time, and I would hope that in a really good workplace where there's genuine consultation and a good relationship, it would be close to all of the time. What the boss brought to the table is not the final outcome, because by taking the workers' views into account, the health and safety reps' views into account, the outcome changes. And that's how you know that it's genuine consultation.
Sure.
If you've got a record of the boss saying, yeah, I consult, but every single time this so-called consultation happens, nothing changes, that's not genuine consultation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I mean, that it's just random chance that, the employer is always right.
Yeah, the employer's always right. No. We know better.
We do. Okay, cool. So that's So and as you said, like a lot of these questions are sort of about that sort of thing. So like a lot of times it just says we're not even consulted. We're just sort of the proposed change is sort of just put to us in a meeting, and then we might get to grumble about it a little bit, but that's not consultation.
Okay. So what do you do then?
So what do you do then? So, what to do if the employer isn't, coming to the table?
Okay, so look, there are a couple of things. Let's assume that you've taken it to the employer. If you haven't already taken it to the employer and pointed out and actually shown them the section in the Act and actually shown them Regulation 21 in the regs, which spells out what is meant to happen. So if what is meant to happen doesn't happen because they just give you this and say, well, this is what we're doing, you can point out and say, look, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, but with greatest respect, this is what the Act says, this is what the reg says, this is not what you've done. So pull them up on it. Request consultation. Formally request that that they not proceed with this change. Give them a few days to get back to you. Record that. And if you feel that there's not going to be any movement and you've taken it to them, then you can issue a PIN.
Yeah.
And because Section 36 has been absorbed into Section 35, it has something's just popped up.
Got a question?
It means that it's got a penalty. It means that the inspectors can't say they can't look into it. It means that they have to investigate. That's what you do. Make sure you record everything. Make sure you write down when you've asked for consultation. Make sure you note down when the employer came to you with this proposal that then they say is going to happen in a week.
Yeah.
Do all of that.
Yeah.
Call your union for assistance if the employer ignores. call WorkSafe. Say, especially if it's something major that you're really concerned is going to have big implications, ring WorkSafe and say, look, I've been trying to consult. But, PINs, I think, is the way to go. We might get an avalanche of PINs, which might be a really good thing.
We're hoping for, well, not hoping for, but, if tomorrow, we talked about the prospect of tomorrow there being an avalanche of Section 35 PINs coming through, look, if that's what needs to happen, then, that's what needs to happen. So, we've had a question come through. So the OHS specialist is also an OHS rep with the DWG. That sounds like a problem to begin with.
I'll deal with that.
We'll get to that in a second. Which is the DWG is the entire worksite. The majority of the time, consultation occurs between management and herself. Seldom are other HSRs involved. Even when we ask to be consulted, it tends to be fobbed off. Any advice, please? Thanks. So let's start with that.
Yeah,
HSR.
let's start with that. Firstly, the HSR. Let's not forget this. I think all members of the DWG have to take a bit of responsibility. An HSR is an elected position, so how the hell did this person get elected? If she wasn't elected, and I say it is a she. If she wasn't elected, if she was somehow nominated by management, well, then the members of the of the DWG can actually do something about that. If that person's been in place for more than 12 months, a majority of the DWG can, and I think in this instance must, actually determine that this person is no longer going to be their HSR.
Yep.
Now, it could be that this person was just a normal worker and she was elected, but has now changed position.
Sure.
A huge conflict of interest, number one. Number two, if there are other health and safety reps in that same DWG, well, then they have to be consulted. Management cannot pick and choose the one rep that they speak to. So this is where I would say put a pin on, because there is no consultation. This person, and I think maybe if you want to avoid doing getting 50% of the DWG to write, maybe approach her and say, look, you've now had a change in position. You're now the OHS specialist. You can't be our rep. We're asking you to please step down, and the other reps will step up. Thirdly, why is the whole worksite one DWG? I much prefer to see more than one DWG, more than one rep. There's obviously more than one rep there, but you get into this situation with, if you've got 4 reps or 5 reps in one DWG, who gets superiority?
Sure.
Who does all the work? Who does management go to? Well, we've got the answer in this case.
That's right.
So there are a few things that I think need to be thought about. It's going to be, it's been happening for a while. You've complained about it. You haven't got anywhere. I think you need to look at really setting things right, and they include getting rid of her as the HSR, looking at maybe having more than one DWG, explaining to the employer and maybe having to issue PINs about what consultation is, and moving on from there.
Yep. So there was a lot of red flags in that. And definitely if you think you might need a bit more of assistance in any of that, maybe breaking up a couple of those DWGs, feel free to get in contact.
Yep.
With sort of things that we can provide assistance with.
Yeah, and also in terms of the DWG stuff, that's actually seeking a variation, and members of the DWG or employees can nominate someone to represent them in those negotiations. So that would be a good place to start, calling in your union, or it could be someone, if your union has a health and safety officer, or else your organiser, and there has to be agreement on varying the DWGs. But where there isn't agreement, that's where an inspector comes in, and then you can run the argument, say, look, this is a really big workplace, we don't know why there's only one DWG. There are a whole lot of things about DWGs in the Act that are very helpful, so that basically workers are properly represented.
Yeah, there's a reason why I think that the DWGs are sort of... The DWG is sort of the foundation of a lot of other stuff that comes on top of that. I mean, it's the DWG that elects the HSRs, and then the HSRs can issue PINs, and it sort of all starts with that having proper DWGs, and it's just so critical.
Yeah, and who's in the DWG?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, we've had queries about can the manager be or can the supervisor be the health and safety rep? Well, a manager or supervisor who is probably the person who makes decisions about health and safety issues shouldn't be the HSR and probably shouldn't even be in the DWG. They can have a separate DWG, but basically they're management.
Okay, so we've gotten a little that first question came through from Stuart, and then we've got a bit of a follow up from Stuart as well. So this says, the DWG is the entire site. So the HSRs.
No, that's not right.
So Stuart's saying that the HSRs only have to nominate and then be seconded.
No.
That's
the Act is very
correct.
clear. Firstly, when DWGs are negotiated, it's at that point that there has to be agreement on whether there's going to be more than one health and safety rep and whether there are going to be any deputies. So that's a point for negotiation and agreement. Secondly, once that's been agreed to, it is the members of the DWG that elect those people, right? They don't nominate themselves. They can, of course you can nominate, but they don't. It's not this automatic process where you get nominated, the boss seconds you or a fellow manager seconds you and then you become the rep. Well, does this mean, therefore, that there's no set number of health and safety reps? Does it mean
everyone gets to be a HSR?
Stuart, I think your workplace is a bit of a schmozzle there when it comes to DWGs, health and safety reps, and election of health and safety reps. Happy to help provide advice.
Absolutely.
You can always, that's the other thing, you can always send inquiries to Ask Renata, and I can send you back stuff in writing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool.
Oh, and check the website. There's lots of stuff on the website.
Absolutely. Always, go to ohsreps.org.au. We've got whole sections there on how to set up a DWG and how to sort of
and what the law says.
And what the law says. Yeah, absolutely. And helpful to have that sort of put it under your boss's nose and let them know what the go is.
Stuart's added maybe cover how a health and safety rep gets elected.
That's from Sam.
Sam, sorry.
That's a note that Sam.
I didn't see that. Okay, so
but let's get back into so just a couple of things to think about during this whole process once to get this consultation process up and running. So
firstly, one of the reasons that we had to try and push for that change for 36 to go into 35, and as I said, it's really only a very short-term, not very satisfactory fix, is that work safety inspectors have really had a very poor record when it comes to dealing with employers' failure to consult. Now, for us, it's a really fundamental thing, but for some reason, inspectors don't think it's a big deal. And we've had, in the past, PINs cancelled because technically the consultation failed. Okay, it failed, but what are we going to do about it now? They didn't consult. It's too late. We say, oh my God, this is a pattern of failure to consult. And then it means that the rep has to put another pin on because the thing that they were not consulted on is now creating a risk to workers, which is nuts. Yeah,
actually I did get one of those come through as well. Sort of how do you sort of delay that process, you know what I mean? So like if they've already done the change, like they've already implemented the process, or there was one here where they had already sort of agreed upon amongst management's own selves the design of a new working area, and it was sort of already going ahead and they were already making those changes.
Well, look, I think obviously the earlier you can get in there, and part of the reason why it's been proposed changes is because clearly making changes to a proposal doesn't cost anything. Making changes to something that's already in train or has already been done can cost. So I think what you have to do is just keep pushing and demanding that they comply with their duty to consult.
That's right.
And if they don't consult, well then go in hard. Don't accept, it's too late now, we can't do anything about it. You go in and you say, well, this is a hazard. I've identified a hazard, so now I'm putting a pin on the hazard.
Yeah, that's
if you consulted, we wouldn't have had this problem.
That's right, and that's actually the question there. So it's the office is about to have a refit. HSRs were not consulted during the design phase. We've identified an OHS issue, but have been told that the design is locked in and can't be changed. What can we do? Can we issue?
Well, I'd actually put a pin on the design. I'd actually put a pin on failure to consult, and then pointing out that you've seen the design. A design might be locked in, but it can be changed. Who says a design is locked in?
Sure.
Once it's done. I mean, this reminds me of an example of a nurse. She won the ANMF Nurse of the Year one year, and they were building some new ward, and designed the doors in this shocking way that was going to create a problem, and she tried to have it addressed, and it didn't, and it happened, and then she put pins on, and they had to change all the bloody doors. I mean, how
only supposed to
stupid.
blow the bloody doors off.
How stupid, exactly.
Well, yeah, actually, that's exactly right. Like, the further you... I mean, if it's a health and safety risk, and if it gets pinned, then it's going to have to be addressed at some point. So, you know, it's actually probably a smart move on management's behalf.
Yeah, exactly.
Consulting rather than having to change something and then change it back and then fix the problem, rather than just, if we do it right from the beginning, then, you know, it seems to be a lot easier.
And that's a sort of argument that you can put to management when you go into that preliminary meeting to set it up. You say, look, this, you know, I'm not being bloody minded.
No, that's right.
And there are reasons why this is in the Act. You know, the Act, in the principles of the Act, it says workers are entitled to and should be encouraged to participate. It's your health and safety. Another great example, when I was at the union, which is now called United Voice, hotels go through these regular refurbishments where some interior designer goes in, and the hotel might be 40 years old or 20 years old, and they go in and they refurbish the rooms, and they're beautiful. And the number of times that there have been problems is incredible. But I do remember one time where the housekeeper, who is like the management person who covers all the housekeeping, so it's quite a senior position, management went to her and said, you know, here, what do you think? And here's the room. And she said, well, I'm going to ask the workers and the health and safety reps. So she got them all to go in, and she had them look around, and they came up with some amazing things. Like the designer had designed in the bathroom floor-to-ceiling mirrors.
Oh, cool.
And the housekeeping staff said, great. And so how are we going to clean those? And they looked around, they said, oh, well, the only way you could clean them is actually to clamber up on the sinks.
Yep.
And of course, that's a big no-no. So they changed it, and they saved themselves money.
Yep.
And they saved themselves probably
time,
work cover injuries.
And
lost
hours,
that's
everything.
a really good. Another thing that they found was everything had really sharp edges, and they have to do the rooms really quickly. That was no as well. So it makes sense. And, you know, unless your employer is really thick, if you can convince them that this is the reason why. I mean, to say that a design is locked in is a bit foolish, really.
Sure.
Nothing is locked in until the first brick is set.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. And stones can always be removed as well.
yeah.
You know, but it's just double
Or
handling
doors
if you have to.
blown off.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So things to think about. Next one. WorkSafe has unfortunately never prosecuted on failure to consult. So don't rely on WorkSafe. Try and use your collective power to bring the employer to the table. Make sure everyone is on side. Make sure everyone complains. Make sure everyone understands that they have this right. Issue pins.
Yep.
Right? Don't let the employer forget it. Every time there's a slip up, go to the employer and say, oh, we heard a rumour that this was happening. Or who was that guy who was in there? Consult. Demand it.
That's right.
Be clear about what you want, right? Now, of course, you're not experts, and of course, the employer, you know, it's not agreement, and of course, the employer isn't going to just say, sure, we'll change everything just because you say so. But they have to learn to respect the views of the health and safety reps and respect the views of the workers. And you have to stand up and make your voice heard. And finally, record everything. That's really important because, of course, before you issue a PIN, you have to have consulted on the issue. You don't have to consult about issuing the PIN, but you've consulted with them about their failure to consult.
Could you just continue talking about that for 2 seconds? I forgot one thing that I was going to do.
You forgot one thing that he was going to do. So I think getting into that habit, and we did have that beautiful little consultation handbook that we did at one of the, and I don't have it here either, one of the conferences, and we've also got the notebook that people got at last time's conference. If you don't have any of those, just get yourself a notebook. You know, it's very old-fashioned. That's what it was.
This is what I was going to get. So some of you might remember these from a couple of years ago. We got these done up for one of our previous conferences.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, was it? Yep. And they're pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing to remember too, that this is about proving to WorkSafe that you as the health and safety rep have consulted with the employer. And it really annoys me that they don't have to prove that they've consulted with you. So tell them that they need to do it. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. And so this is the last one that we have here in the OHS team.
I probably have one in my office.
They're very hot property.
But you can download the...
We're going to make... So these ones are fancy ones because they're like they're like triplicate paper. There's, you get the employer copy and then the WorkSafe copy and then the HSR copy. So these ones were super expensive to make, weren't they?
Yeah.
So this is
Thanks,
the last
Slater
one.
and Gordon.
Thanks, Slater and Gordon. So I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna give this away to one lucky HSR.
Wow.
Anyone watching right now, if you comment, I want the record of consultation notepad, I will get in contact and I'll get it sent out to you.
So it's the first one. So first in, best dress.
First one that comments saying they want it, they can have it. But obviously we don't want just one person to have it, so we're gonna do up some PDFs. They might not be in. They're not going to be in the triplicate paper, but we'll upload them so you can download them, and then you can
upload. So download. Was very technical language.
That's right.
When I came in before, the guys were talking about stuff, and I went, "Okay, I'll just go and do something else."
But then when it comes to consultation, you know who you want talking to you.
Great.
Cool. So if anyone wants that, let us know. Because like you said, it's just so important to have everything recorded. When it comes to WorkSafe investigations, if it comes to that, if it comes to, even just keeping for your own memory. I forget things all the time if I don't write them down. So
and he's young.
Well, we'll send that out and then we'll upload those links to those documents that you guys can use probably sometime tomorrow.
The other thing I should add, reminded me when you said documents, and that is that we're telling you this. It's on our website, but the Act is the Act. It's in black and white with a green cover. There's also a lot of material on the WorkSafe website, and there should be links from my site anyway, of quite good short explanatory documents, how to consult in your workplace for employers, what does consultation mean. And we had, those were done a few years ago, but Inspector Clayton Larkin,
who was on our last webinar.
He took my comments, he's very good. And so they were done a little while ago, they still are available, probably be updated. I assume WorkSafe will need to update them to reflect the changes to 3536, but it always adds to your arguments if you can take in stuff that's got the WorkSafe. The Act is the Act, that's the law, and this is what WorkSafe, the regulator, says should be happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that about covers it.
Yeah.
That's that's consultation from head to toe.
Any questions?
I think we've had any more questions come through. Just double check. No, it doesn't look like that we have. But as always, the video this video will be up in the OHS Reps OHS Network Facebook group, which is where, if you are watching, you are right now. So we'll be responding to questions anytime someone comments on it or posts in that forum. So yes, consultation's a hot button issue, and Sam's just confirmed, no extra questions. Look, at any time, people that have sent in their questions already, or if anyone's watching this tomorrow and they have a question that comes up, always feel like you can get in touch through Ask Renata
or in the network. There's always really helpful people like Visalia who answer questions.
Visalia is the best.
There's also on the website too, there's stuff on consultation. There's how to fill out a PIN if you haven't done one of those. I know it's a bit hard.
That can be quite daunting.
Yeah,
filling out a PIN and taking that to your boss, and it's it's a form, it's a you got to have all your ducks in a row when you want to fill out one of those.
The fact that it's in a form, as long as you fill that out answering the questions, it helps, because the Act actually doesn't say you have to use that form. You can do it in any form, but you have to have certain information on it, so that helps you put the information in.
Absolutely.
And look, the other thing, I'll do a plug for this, I don't know if it normally comes, but for those of you who have had your 5-day training, we're at the beginning of a new year, so you're entitled to do your refresher training.
Get that refresher.
So don't forget, do that, because it's also an opportunity to speak with other reps. How you going? Have you issued any pins? What happened? What do you do?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. All right, cool. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up then. So thank you very much, Renata, for coming in.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
You're always here anyway.
I'm always here anyway. But, you know.
Thank you for travelling down the hallway. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again very soon. Next time we have next one of these sessions, or if not,
which I think is the first. No,
it'll be the next. I think it's like the 6th of
March
or something. And we've got some really cool stuff lined up in the next couple of sessions. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you again soon.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.